To everybody in our chat that we have now. See, in how many places this high is going.
It's gonna post this everywhere.
Hey.
All of
We are
Facebook's
live. So,
he has intermittent results.
huh?
A little X on the YouTube,
Right.
on one of the YouTubes.
Now this is the other application. What is called? Anyways, here we are, and we are here for the next 1 hour. We're gonna take some breaks during the time. We try to solve the problem that the camera was autofocusing every time by covering our whiteboard with the towel, which I used personally to shower earlier. So as double value.
We're going to time our segments in 20 minutes, for which we're going to start the timer.
Well, I removed the 20 minutes, and you know what I discovered as well? That our break image, I show it to everybody. The one things that it counts down from 3 minutes to 0, but it actually lasts 2 minutes 45 seconds. It's 50 seconds faster.
You mean this whole time people didn't actually have time to pee?
This whole time people had no time to go to the toilet and do their business.
Tricky.
Oh, they were halfway to then when we start going back live. So now we're gonna produce a correct timed break. Okay. Today is a very special day. In fact, this is our Monday streaming channel, but today is Friday. Why? Because from next week on, Friday, we're gonna have a special, different kind of streaming with topics that goes a little bit outside our classic blockchain, decentralization. But because I am a lazy bastard, I didn't prepare anything to make it different, so this Friday is gonna be the classic technical chat on a generic level. We'll take it more easier than usual, but we think about the future, how data protection is gonna work in a decentralized world, how biometrics can be broken as a security system, how encryption can be broken, what are the challenges to keep data private, to control data, and to get security access to data in the coming years. So this is the topic for today.
In fact, I have a question to kick us off. If Elon Musk could put a chip in your brain, would you buy one?
That's a good question. Elon Musk putting a chip in my brain. The question is does he insert him himself? And good thing is it's the brain and not somewhere else. I also changed all the position of the different button to change the angle. And you can see everybody here underneath here. There is, this is mine and this is Barton's. We have a title that defines our name, so when you go in the chat and send us a message, you know who you can ask a question to. Okay? So, enough with our title, we can remove it. So, Elon Musk put a chip in my brain. That's very interesting. So, first of all, I want to understand, does this chip transmit information or only works independently in conjunction with my brain? Can I see the software inside this chip or is it a surprise? How does this chip integrate with my brain? Because I know that kids that are completely unable to hear, sometimes they can be helped with electronic to hear. And even people that don't see, I think there has been an experiment a few years ago, it's not even a recent thing, that somebody managed to connect a camera to the nerve part for either a damage in a certain way. It doesn't apply to everybody, but the person said that he could actually see, probably not high definition, but he can see. In these cases, the technology applied is very important. I also know that for some brain damage, they can insert inside the electrode with a mini computer that sends stimulation at when it's needed, per se, you know? And the people that maybe have a time walking, have a time manage to actually gain, camera you focus, gain back the capacity. Okay, I show you Barton's face is better than mine. And so that's the question.
So I appreciate that there's so many positive things that could potentially be done with this technology. Certainly. There's no question that you could help sick people, help people see, help people hear, restore tactile sense, all these things. And even go beyond this to produce a kind of a super capacity in people to, access a calculator in their brain, to Google things directly from their brain in the long term of this technology. That's not the question that I'm really concerned with. The question I'm concerned with has to do with what you mentioned too, which is security. So you and I both come from kind of like a hacker culture and the hacker mindset. What can you do with what you have? So at what level of security is required for something that feeds directly into your brainstem? At what point if this thing is supposed to read from the internet, at what point can somebody figure out how to spoof the signal from the site it's supposed to get on the internet and feed back information into your brain, which at the moment it's in your brain. Your connection, the way that you take information from this chip could become subconscious. It's not something that necessarily it's going to flash a word in your brain and you're going to say, the chip is saying blah, blah, blah. It's going to stimulate you directly, wire directly into the behavior. And so I wonder how much power you take over a person if you're able to mimic the signal that comes out of this, to trick it into transmitting what you want. Even if it's not hacked, how long is it going to be until Elon Musk is selling advertising space in your brain?
That's something scary. It's already scary how technology like mobile application, while in the background, can listen to your microphone, decode the keywords that you use when talking with your friends, and automatically show you advertisements that are on topic. My question is, I'm looking at the face of Elon Musk in in the picture in this website.
And he was asked, is it safe?
Exactly. Is Elon Musk already having a chip implanted in his head? Is he responsible for the thing that he does, or is somebody remote controlling him?
His kid, for sure.
Right, just the name that he gave is actually an
like
SQL injection. It's a code injection. I don't know. In fact, this is a theme that in cyberpunk movies, cyberpunk movies, you see a lot with these people that is half integrated with strange devices. But there is always the official government release one, and the underground hacker that can give you the safe one, the one that is actually doesn't have exactly or is hacked to do things that the one given by the large control is not supposed to be.
I give the example that's one of the terms that's been in our culture for a while from, say, Orwell in 1984. He coined the idea of thought crime, that not only going out and taking an action in society, but even having a thought that's against what the status quo says you're supposed to believe can be a crime that the government can punish you for. So I think at the time that we put a chip in the brain, we literally get into the territory of having the ability to detect and affect and punish thought crime at the source. Say, if this thing, so one thing already, can it put thoughts into your brain? Another thing already, this thing is going to take inputs. You have neurons that are going to send signals to it, and it's going to have to parse those inputs somehow to decide what to search for, whatever else. How much transient information about the state of your thoughts is going to feed into this chip? And who's going to go analyze it, and what are they going to know about it?
If it's an autonomous chip, maybe I can see application, for example, in compulsive behaviors. It detects the compulsive behavior and stop you or alert you about it, and then you can take control of yourself over the compulsive behavior.
So feedback a little.
Project a picture of waterfalls to make me relax. I don't know. You can think of people like pedophiles or sexual addicted or kleptomaniacs or if somebody is a kleptomaniac and is recognized by a doctor that he is kleptomaniac and is embarrassed about himself because he cannot control his desire to take something, having a chip of sort that detect the stimulus of certain behavior. I'm not a doctor, so I'm just guessing. Okay, is that what can be done? And tell me, hey, or my cell phone goes beep 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 beep. I can take control, or people that suffer of anxiety. Then this is in the detection part. If this chip can also then send stimulation to modify the behavior. That's scary also because at the point can force somebody to, I can imagine they use in the military, right?
Yeah,
They were
exactly.
giving drugs of any sort to the military, so they would go and run in the front line to get killed.
Does a soldier need a chip in the brain that's going to tell him how to aim and how to...
Also,
whether he has the go signal. And what if somebody hacks that?
but also to remove the fear, to remove
suppress the negative emotion.
suppress emotion that can affect the way that you or somebody wants you to behave. Right?
This is precisely the thing that I think is the very difficult question that this is going to push us to ask. So already, for the last 100 years, we've had the field of psychology developing. And psychology really only in the last couple of decades has started to get properly scientific in a deep sense. In the sense that we moved into not behavioral science. There's a specific field that I'm thinking of, cognitive psychology it's called. So where they really look at the mechanics at a physical level of the neurons and the way they behave and try to map this onto behavior and things. And so, but I think the question of how a person arrives at thoughts, how they make decisions, what informs how they want to behave is still deeply mysterious to us. And I think we have to really, really understand this carefully before we start going and mucking around in it. Because at the time that now my brain is sending signals to this chip, and this chip is sending signals to my brain, and my brain can't tell the difference between what comes from the brain and what comes from the chip. Which how would it? For any other neuron, the brain is a decentralized organism. Each neuron is a node, and a signal comes through, and one node doesn't know where the previous node came from. It doesn't know whether this came from chip or brain. It just knows that it got activated.
That's a very good point.
So it's quite it's complicated to know. We risk that we muck around with what makes us who we are without understanding in the first place what makes us who we are. And I think that's something that's going to cause some challenges.
I wonder if this is not already happening. We don't know about it.
In fact.
We got injected with a chip when walking on the road with somebody with no, because there is the primitive aspect, exactly. Yeah, right. It's not a gun, so we get the coronavirus together with the breath of the guy that is shooting us. And exactly, so that part, besides these things that the people may think I am a conspiracy theorist.
I'm a conspiracy theorist, to be clear.
But how the installation happened? I saw videos surgery where electrodes were implanted in the brain in order to be able to stimulate areas for people that are sick, obviously, that rather than living a life in misery, they go to the risk of an operation of sort, because it's never been guaranteed a success and there is a chance of mistakes. But the integration of a chip, so either you start making the brain adapted to the chip, or you make the chip adapt to the brain. So when I connect the USB port, a mouse or something that I always need to rotate twice to enter correctly, how many times they need to rotate the chip to connect to my brain? So my question is, what is the methodology for connectivity? Is it through radio waves, stimulation, electric? I guess electricity is a lot to do with it, but also how does this read? Because I saw, for example, they do brain scan where if you think something beautiful, certain area highlighted, those are I have no idea, I'm illiterate.
To me, I think this gives a clue how it works, because I remember the research you're talking about. In order to do this, say, not every image is represented the same way in every person's brain. So the way that they do this is they take a person and put the equipment that measures where the blood flow is, where the electricity is, and for tens of thousands of images, they sit there and they show you an image and they map what lights up in your brain. And they show you an image and they map what lights up, till eventually they have a mapping for your brain of which features your brain stores where. Only after they've done this mapping process for one particular person's brain can they then show you an image and then reconstruct the image from which areas of your brain light up.
So they don't know what image you're seeing.
Correct.
And they can detect it from...
And in the same way, I think, I assume the way that the chip works, based on how it's been described, is that it's going to expose a certain set of, you could think of them like pins in hardware, certain electrodes, and some neurons will reach out and connect to these, some axons will reach out and connect to them, but what that information means when it comes into the brain is going to need to be learned. You would experience it like a sense. You know, in the same way that you know, when you feel pain, there's a sense that comes to some nerves, or when there's a, you know, an image or a sound that comes to some nerves. And this sensory information, then, your brain would need to learn how to interpret.
So there is a machine learning process connected to this chip.
Well, in fact, it's not machine learning, it's actual. And machine learning is modeled after the way the neurons work in the brain, a neural network. And so it's an actual learning. But
no, because now we enter in the Black Mirror area, right? So Black Mirror, which is a series in Netflix, actually it's not really a series, it's a set of many independent episodes, so each episode is a story on its own. Really focus on this aspect, on the aspect that people can make a copy of their brain, meaning that their whatever they know, whatever they experience, their characteristic or the personality, their persona, except the physical aspect, they can make a copy of it in a USB, in a data, and they can run this in emulation of a brain, so that this emulation of a brain is actually the copy of the person. So at the same question will give potentially the same answer. Obviously, from the point on, that copy has its own life, learns its own things, and my brain keeps going. But up to the moment of the copy, they are identical. So this is applied for people that may be sick, they're gonna die, so that they transfer, or they transfer the brain to the cloud, where there is also all the other friends and they meet and they have holidays. That there is a second life kind of effective place where you can keep living your life even if you're dead on the reality. Or people can make copies to do something else. And there is this big debate on artists copy humans that deserve respect, have some rights, or those are just pieces of software, who cares, right? Meaning that if the copy is not aware to be a copy and thinks to be still you, and you punish this person by torturing them, and they suffer, are they really suffering? Is just a computer simulation? It's a very beautiful thing. So if I can do an analysis of my brain, a set of whatever I wonder if this chip can connect and copy data that we don't even know what it means or what it is, but it can, it's like the DNA, right? DNA is so long, contains so much data, we think that certain data is just trash, and while later we discovered they were not trash, it was actually data for something. And if this chip can connect, can see the old things, but we don't know what they are, see how they variate, can make a copy, see stable, because probably memories are fixed. Does this...
it's quite interesting.
Well, I will suggest that we take a 3-minute break, okay? And or maybe less, because this lasts 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and we come back, okay? And we are back, and we are back. Hope everybody had the chance to go take a leak. Now, we start talking about data security, right? And thinking how probably the brain can shape a unique key that nobody can copy, because we know that fingerprint, that we thought it was such a secure system because every individual, every person has a different one, can be copied quite easily, and can be, so we saw in the movie, but I saw actual tests that they're done by actual people to there are way to make more secure fingerprint sensor, but in general that can be defeated easily. Biometrics also can be emulated. So what is a unique fingerprint in terms of set of information that belongs? So with this chip in the brain, can I focus and unlock my computer? Can I focus and make the ATM machine give me money?
Here's one I think of. Okay, so let's imagine, just for funsies, right? That in order to because this is the thing, fingerprint also used in certain websites that want to figure out if you're the same computer logging in a lot of places. They try to make a fingerprint of your system, so they see which programs are running, any kind of configuration settings they can take from your computer, they put in a blob, and they compare it to other things that they've seen log in, right? So what if, to get an idea of my brain, this chip is going to generate a sequence of impulses like this sports team, this ice cream flavor, this video game, this blah blah blah, for like 100 different things, and each one it's going to measure whether my brain has a positive response or a negative response to that thing. Would that be unique enough, or say how many different items do you have to run through for a particular person before which things they light up for and which things they don't forms a unique signature that identifies that person?
I guess that a lot of people look alike. You really have categories, but I wonder if this technology applied to a dating site.
Okay, sure. You can run a brain scan for what things you like and match you with other people.
Or when hiring somebody.
There's no lying about it.
Exactly, correct. Right? In fact, there is a very beautiful movie, The Invention of Lying, that is this world where people don't lie. Simply they don't know how to lie, so they say the truth. And when the guy meets the girl on the road and smiles to her, she says, you're ugly, and he says, I would like just to sleep with you. And probably a chip like this is actually bringing to the point where even lying becomes evident, so you will be able to immediately identify, unless somebody is mentally psychopath, then can trick the chip. I don't know what are the advantages that Elon Musk lists in doing this? Medical only, or also practical on daily life?
I don't know. I think when he made the announcement, I didn't read the article because I was so scared. Because when I come in contact with this idea, immediately I see all of the potential dangerous consequences. I think this kind of, it's kind of in the category of transhumanism, right? That eventually there's going to be chips plugged into your brain that are on the internet, and you're going to have organs that are made out of machines and biomaterials instead of. And a lot of people are very excited about this because they look forward to being mechanically superhuman in their life instead of being limited to what we are. But I think for me personally, it's kind of a scary topic because we don't even know what we are in the sense that's important. It's a deep philosophical question. You go and start messing with it before you know the answer, So in the same way, I'm worried about, it's like if there is some kind of purpose to life or whatever, and you go and you put a brain in, a chip in your brain that gives you, who knows how much you muck with it. But it's, but that's
to give a better introspection. There was another very nice movie, I think made in the 60s, 50s, 60s, which has been remade recently, but the original, as always, is the best. Where there was this machine that you put on your head and you can record the experience. So obviously you go climbing and then somebody can put in their head and replay the experience so they feel they're climbing, right? Obviously there is the adult industry taking over this machine because you can have the feeling too. But somebody made the experiment to put this machine on the head of somebody that is dying. And then they're scared because says, if I put it on my head, will I die? So is this going to affect me, or I just can see what is the outcome, what is the experience, what the person see and feel during the process of dying, right? And which I'm not telling you what is. You know, watch the movie. But I wonder if a chip like this actually can record and replay a set of emotion. And now that amazing...
this one, I don't think it's possible for a technical reason that I explain if you want, which is that every person... So brain development is an evolutionary process within each individual. So which exact neurons fire and which sequence and how they map to each other is something that grows completely uniquely for every person. So I think at the level, at least at the very least, if you're just capturing like the sequences of neurons that fired from different parts of one person's brain, if you tried to get exactly the neurons in the same areas of another person's brain to fire, that's going to be a jumbled experience.
But for your own
that
self,
person's brain is not mapped. For your own self, possibly. For your own self, because you're feeding it the input in the same structure that it produced the output. Possibly you could record your own memory if you want.
Can you imagine you record yourself when you were just born or the first experience eating an ice cream, and when you're 75 years old you can reveal to be an impact. I wonder for all the psychosomatic sickness or things that can be also used as a cure, right? It determine an experience. There are pleasant experiences that make you healthier or heal you from depression, from
I wonder if you could train this thing by making an association. So imagine that this thing has like, say to be simple, like 3 outputs, you know, and some neurons are going to bind to each of the outputs. And you have to go through a certain training process with the thing to where you're...
You can use the thing yourself, you know, like there is no problem.
You have to go through a certain training process with the thing where you, so it says, okay, we're gonna fire this electrode, and when you do it, you have to always raise your left hand. And then this electrode, we're gonna fire it, and always make sure you're looking at the color blue. And this one, and so you go through a process where, you know, eventually you feel one impulse and you associate it with a certain thing, and you feel another impulse and you associate it with a certain thing. And this becomes kind of like a jumping off point where, so after this, when you feel the thing and it makes you imagine the color blue, then you can associate that with, okay, I've programmed this to mean like somebody's unlocked my front door. And when you, some other feeling you associated with raising your hand, you start to think, okay, every time my brain suddenly makes me feel like I'm raising my hand, then it means that, I got a notification on Facebook. So in this way, I think you could kind of bootstrap yourself into making sense of the information that comes out of the outputs.
This mechanics is used actually for prosthetics that are bionic. So people that lose an arm or part of an arm, when they build a prosthetic, there are 2 different ways for them to operate it. One, if there are still muscles active there, they can just pull the muscles and they kind of push a button in the prosthetic, so which make them, sort of open and close the hand, or rather than move the legs in a certain way. But more advancedly, they can actually control them from their brain, and there is already application. And people says, because there is what they call the false arm, false. I don't know in English, sorry, but meaning that many times you lose your arm, but your brain doesn't compute that you lost an arm.
The phantom limbs.
Phantom limbs, there you go. So you can still feel itchy, you need to pretend to scratch, like something. So in that terms, the brain can still tell the hands to open, and it makes very clear message for these things to happen, which can be detected. And again, I'm not an engineer of sort, but and they actually move the arm. So in a certain way, there is already this sort of connection, right? So I wonder what Elon Musk is going after with the chip.
And that's the part that I think is, because okay, so on one hand, Elon Musk is a futurist, he has these crazy big ideas that are going to change humanity forever. On the other hand, Elon Musk is a businessman. And if he doesn't have the idea for how this technology can be used or abused to make money in other ways, somebody who buys his company an IPO eventually will. It's inevitable that this power, the servers that control these things, these chips in your brain, are going to fall into the hands of somebody who wants to maximize the profit. And think the power they have over you then.
The question here is, in the parallel of evolution, where we know on one side we're moving toward decentralized systems, and in another we're moving into IoT, if you want, because this is a sort of an IoT, right? Integration and communication like with
an IoT, Internet of Brains.
IOC, Internet of Chips. And right. So in the moment that each part become independent and integrates with the many other parts, and no more communicating with the central server, right? And this is easily verifiable and controllable, not from within, but from the connection methods.
So you end up with maybe B2B communication, brain to brain.
Brain to brain. Exactly. If you open and you allow, and if you digitally sign the origin, if you...
it says such and such would like to chat with you. Please imagine your password to open the chat.
And that's exactly what I was mentioning before.
And you're like, I'm not thinking of it. Fuck, I thought of
it. Which was never think about the white horse.
Right.
So in effect, this is surely a step that we're gonna get to. Is now with the coronavirus, there were a lot of talks. The many governments want to forcefully implant the chip because they can monitor and you can align. There is the vaccination passport embedded in the band, and and you never know, right? But at the same time, the majority of people comply with these things anyway, right?
That's something worth talking about, I think, when we come back.
You want to take a break? Break it is. And we're back. Hey, this short break was absolutely important for our brain to refresh, and the chip was overheating. So
I just had to cool it down for a minute.
Okay. Now, future and technology. So we see that people is gonna put chip in the brain. Wow. And smart object and IoT are gonna start sending data constantly. It's gonna be the day that our underwear have a Bluetooth, and our cell phone can beep us and tell us it's time to change them because they're dirty.
Or we get the signal straight in the brain.
Exactly, or exactly in the chip of the brain. Can you imagine it? You fart and the chip analyze automatically if what you ate was good or not, how you digest and stuff. So
or imagine you have smart devices all over your house, like a camera, like motion detecting camera in every room, and the state of the locks and the state of whether the lights are on. And all this gets translated into a constant feed of information in your own mind. Anywhere you are in the world, you can feel. You feel like you would feel when someone touches you or when someone speaks to you. You feel when the door's locked, when the door's unlocked, when the lights go on in the kitchen, when the stove is on, when the milk in the refrigerator goes bad.
So the milk in the refrigerator goes bad. How do you know? A feeling.
Yeah. They just talk about, they make like a literal sixth sense out of these things.
Yeah, which is a possibility. Is indeed a possibility.
Yeah.
So, in the moment that we want to talk about something, give me 1 second. I leave either Barton to see. Give me the camera. Can you check? And we want to talk about the moment where we have an issue with maintaining a secure password and maintaining secure access to data, and have the possibility to do this in a way that we don't have to remember a long password, we don't have to remember a long private key, we don't have to rely on a card that we can potentially lose, we don't have to rely on trusting a third party to maintain these things. And I think that's really the key for the future. Can you imagine if we could have in a single place the possibility to have securely not counterfeited documents like the passport, like the biometrics are very much used. In the UK, I was shocked how I could walk out of the country just walking, because the biometric will recognize me from when I entered, and they will automatically check me out of the country. So no custom, no any security, passport control, nothing. I just make sure that I have a ticket to take my flight, and I walk through and I go. Probably if I trigger an alarm or something, a warning, then a police officer will stop me and check my document by hand. But they do rely on my biometrics in the guarantee that is a unique, secure method to recognize me that nobody else can emulate, so nobody else can pretend. I wonder with twins how it works. Twins enter the country, then one twin go out. Does the system recognize which one of the two twins is left compared to the other? And that's
I make things simpler. So right now, maybe it sets off an alarm or something, but in the future, when it realizes that you're walking out the gate and you're not supposed to leave, the chip in your brain will just paralyze you until the police come. In fact, when you commit any crime.
I wonder, it is interesting, the aspect of integration, and how do we keep our data secure in a world that is evolving this way. So we are more and more exposed. Privacy is less and less a matter, even though we try to protect, but is a battle against the giants, right? My cell phone, because of these terms and conditions. That's the point, is this: any application we install, any website we access, they say you agree with our terms and conditions. And there are 20 pages written small like this in terminology that nobody understands. We always click OK. And there we're giving them the right to X-ray us and use this information against us.
In a harvest our organs for the black market and everything.
I wonder.
No, really, I think the biometrics, I think, they're kind of a step in the right direction, but they're not perfect. They're not precise either necessarily. Like, one of the things I started to think about, and the motivation for having them is not always as clear either. So, remember a while back, Apple had this scandal with the phone that they needed to unlock for the FBI. There was a part of some investigation, and they said, sorry, we can't. We built the encryption. If you don't have the password, you can't unlock the phone. And really, and they never quite came to a conclusion with this with the FBI. But you notice a couple of years later, the next iPhone, it unlocks with your face. So you put your face in front of it and it unlocks the thing. So, oh, super cool, you unlock with your face. Nobody else can unlock it but you. Another consequence this has is that if law enforcement puts you in handcuffs and puts you on the ground, they can unlock the phone with your face. So, like, this is
this is for sure a demonstration that some stuff that looks cool to us, and it's practical, I have to say. I pick up my phone, here it is, I look at it, and it unlocks in an instant. I press into the message or the need of the password. I know that if somebody is targeting me specifically, they can unlock this as much as, because really just if somebody is good with wax, you can shape up a face like mine and make it move.
If somebody is determined.
Yes, exactly. And there are very funny video of a girlfriend that wants to spy into the boyfriend, trying to put it in front of the face of the guy when he's sleeping and so on. But with the fingerprint, it's a little more invasive, but it's the same mechanics. In fact, it is an interesting aspect in terms of security. There are high-level security mechanics that unlock in different ways, and based on how you unlock, you access different containers, right? Or trigger an alarm. For example, vaults can open in two-way in banks. When there is the bandit that goes there and try to rob them, they can still open, so the bandit, but at the same time opening with that mechanics trigger an alarm toward law enforcement. The Ledger Nano, which is a tool for keeping cryptocurrencies, you can set different PIN, and based on which PIN you use to unlock, you access a different wallet. So you can show a balance or another, or use an identity on another if that's used to sign document, other things. But I think it's still complex mechanics. Many governments are giving ID card. They have a chip that can do digital signatures combined with a PIN. So the algorithm in the card require the correct PIN to produce the correct signature. My intuition is that any PIN you put is produce a signature, but to be yours, need to have the correct PIN, because if you just give an error, it's easy to brute force, because it's a 4-digit PIN, it's not secure, right? So any PIN give a signature, but only the right PIN is the one that matches your public, your non-public identity, public key. You lose the card, you're in trouble, right? And anyway, the card is issued by the government, which means that the government, in a way or another, has the same key that you have, because who knows if the government sincerely let you create your key, which means that with a bad intention, the person that work at the office where the database of the people private keys maintained can, in a way,
No, in fact, this is a big issue where it comes to things like end-to-end encryption. So back since the 90s, even in the United States, the FBI, law enforcement, has produced proposals to illegalize encryption, or at least encryption that they can't break. They would love to be able to create an encryption standard that only the FBI can access and nobody else can. But in practice, this is impossible, because as soon as you weaken the standard, then anybody who understands the backdoor can get in. But this hasn't stopped them. Say, even recently in the United States, the new Attorney General has called for laws that are going to require to break end-to-end encryption, to make it illegal to have fully encrypted speech with each other. And the justification is that it makes the lives of law enforcement difficult. So they say if people are really allowed to have private conversations that there's no way for us to recover or prove, we lose one of the important tools that we have to prove when people have committed crimes and arrest them. And criminal justice is quite important to keeping peace in a society, so it's not an empty argument. It's quite something that needs to be done. This whole thing, so the business with the face unlocking the iPhone so the police can do it, that plays into the same way. And this idea with the government having the private key for your thing, I think it's not the same as breaking encryption, but I wonder if it falls in the same mechanism, Like I wonder why they need to keep the private key. Do you think that this is just because they're inept about understanding how cryptography is supposed to work, that you should keep the private key? Or do you think the government feels like it has the responsibility to keep the ability to impersonate you in order to move your assets or things in case you die or in case you're arrested or whatever?
I think this goes through different aspects. And people will wonder why I never point the camera they point to me. It's because from the window the sun is hitting the camera perfectly, and when I put my face, there is like if I am hidden in fog.
Yeah.
Exactly, which is just this is the sunlight that hit the camera. I need to put a small piece of curtain to cover that little window. It happens only in a few hours during the day, but back to the camera where I'm shown in a better fashion. So, see, we're learning as we go. That's why we're glad that there is 0 viewers in this podcast. People gonna watch it in another time when we become famous. So, if you think about the certificates for SSH pages or things that those are HTTPS pages. Those are authenticated by a third party.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that if you steal their data, you can pretend to be the other end of the communications, right? In fact, certificate authority, they get hacked, they never tell people that they've been hacked, and there is a huge market of selling those certificates because people can pretend that that's how law enforcement actually work as well. They put themselves as man in the middle. They have the certificate of Gmail. You connect to Gmail, you see that the connection is perfectly okay, while they are just pretending. They, as man in the middle, connect to Gmail with your authentication. So the Gmail thinks everything is okay, is talking directly with the person, and they can see everything in between. Not only see, but they can even change the data, modify the data that comes to you. And that's largely done and unfortunately discovered many years after those keys are published. And sometimes because the security certificate issuance company are hacked, other time because they are forcefully have to deliver keys to government. They have particular laws where they force people to.
Which of course, and the government loves this system because the security of it depends on a couple of centralized points of control. Centralized points of control means things that points where you can go and apply pressure on a bottleneck to get what you want. A decentralized system is impossible.
Decentralized system are impossible. That's why they put a lot of law in forbidding encryption point to point, not through central point.
Yeah, end-to-end encryption can be decentralized in a way that there is no one point in the system that you could attack and insert yourself in the middle.
And in the past there were these articles stating that the government required backdoors on encryption algorithm. And I was laughing because I was saying, that's mathematics, you don't put a backdoor in mathematics. You don't put a backdoor on 1 + 1 = 2. You put a backdoor on a piece of software, on a hardware device, on things like that. But I had to learn that I was wrong. Because an encryption algorithm can be weakened in purpose, in the way the algorithm is designed, to be easily broken if people know the vulnerability.
Correct.
Which means that in general it remains safe, but when somebody knows where to brute force, they can easily extract the decryption key. Obviously, this gives the possibility to government to even filter packets that are encrypted because they know how to decrypt it in a microsecond, a millisecond, in really fast fashion. Problem is that it's not unique to them, but to whoever knows how.
Anybody
that knows how can break their encryption. So,
including criminals or terrorists or anybody who manages to get their hands on this information.
Private institution, and this information can easily be.
It's in fact as if you had a bank vault, and the vault has a very complicated combination, and it's 6 inches steel thick and everything. And 10 centimeters, and you were to go and but somebody is very concerned you're going to lose the password to the vault, so they say, okay, way over in the corner, put a little button. Then when you take the button, it opens everything. And now this whole 6 centimeters, 10 centimeter thick steel door, this protected by a 40-digit password. It's only as safe as somebody
doesn't know that there is a button.
There's a little button. And to me, the physics and the mathematics are very similar in that.
Absolutely.
Situation.
And what is interesting is that we're not just fantasizing on a possibility. This actually happened.
Yeah.
This actually happened with the encryption algorithm in mathematics, but also with hardware device. Routers for home that are super secure, etc., etc. If you connect from outside, adding a small string in your browser identification string, you go in, you bypass completely the username and password that were there. And those are made for maintenance and support. These are made because the people producing this thing are based in country where the government has the power to force them and not to disclose that because else they get into trouble, to add this thing in their device, which are sold worldwide. And not only China, I have to say, the other countries.
It's the world over.
Exactly. So how do you... And I think that culturally, people is becoming more and more literate in the use of online service, but illiterate on the mechanics that this online service go, that they ignore the fact until they're hit with an issue that they are exposed to these things, right? Thank God there is a movement that try to bring again safeguard into this...
and I'll take it, it even goes a step further than what you say about the router has a kind of a backdoor that'll let somebody come and sniff the connection if they know it. Because then you might think, okay, well, as long as I do my really, really sensitive business on the computer without connecting to the internet, probably it's okay, right? But I watched a very interesting presentation recently by a guy at a Black Hat conference who had constructed a way to check every possible instruction on, every single opcode on the processor on the system. He starts his talk by saying, when you buy a processor, you get a manual with a list of all the opcodes and their behaviors, but what do we have other than their word to know if this is the only set of opcodes that exists on the chip? And he'd go through, and through a lot of work, he demonstrated that there are a lot of opcodes that actually work. They seem to do something in the chipset that are not documented in the manual. And he went further, and when he ran this test on several different, Intel, AMD, various kinds of device processors, he found that exactly the same sets of instructions are reserved on each different processor that are not documented in the manuals for those processors.
And they're the same.
And they're the same. So exactly the same instruction numbers and the same kind of pattern, the same bit lines.
They can be addressed in the same way.
So it appears that there's a shadow standard of some set of instructions that each of the processor manufacturers know about, and they make sure to build into the chipset, and they don't add it in the documentation. Mm-hmm. So if this is true, first of all, imagine the only entity that has really the power to enforce such a thing would be government, unless they're really conspiring with each other behind the scenes to do something, which is also possible. But you can imagine that there's so many laws in the United States now, kind of secret laws, this Patriot Act stuff that requires large tech companies to comply with the NSA or the FBI when they're approached. Since 2013, we know about the PRISM program when YouTube and Apple and Microsoft and all these guys were required. They're approached by the NSA and required to build backdoors into their systems for a massive dragnet search that was accessible to the NSA in case of criminal or counterterrorism investigations. And so it's not so hard to imagine that not only did they go to these big tech companies, but also to the hardware manufacturers, and they said, you have to build these instructions without telling anybody into your chips that we can use if we need to get in and see what the user's doing on the chip.
And this is, I do understand the need of government to fight crime, to locate bad behavior, and as we move toward a technological lifestyle, there is the need to also have technological police. I wonder if today a criminal goes back to the old methods of writing on paper, using I don't know, smoke signals to communicate. If he goes completely undetected, because he goes out of the standard and the methodology of work that there are today.
Unless his brain reports that he's right.
Exactly, unless he has the chip in the brain, and then he is in trouble anyway. But I do believe that many actions that are taken to protect the community, the population, the country, also expose the country to risk. Let's suppose this scenario. Government says we need a backdoor in the processor, in the router, like this, so that we can spy criminals, right? Obviously, it's gonna also say to all the offices that belong to the government, don't use that router, process, right? Use the other one. But probably the other one has the same thing by someone else. So unless you do without technology, without cell phone, without even normal phone, IP phone, Skype, Zoom, whatever, without a computer that are either Apple or Huawei or whatever, then you are potentially subject to this exploit, okay? So what is needed at this point? You cannot think to live just by building your own computer from scratch, your chip from scratch, your memory and everything, right? You need to find a layer above this that create the total security. So does not matter anymore on what you are supporting your layer, but you create a layer that allow you to do your things in a secure way. How this is possible? So this is the only way, I think, to say I create something, I know that this is secured by mathematics, cryptography, with algorithms that I can analyze and study properly, or I can build myself, or I can trust because are given by a certain groups or whatever, tested or, but you know, but are easier to monitor, verify and control compared to the set of hardware, operating system and processors that I run these things on top. So which are the technology that are gonna come up, because they will come up, they're allowed to live on this layer and be able to stay safe, stay secure, stay above the implied below part.
So this thing that you're describing is one way that you can protect yourself, but I want to use this moment as a call to action for the other way that we can potentially protect ourselves, which I symbolize with the middle finger apparently, which is the fact that this is why we're so interested in decentralized systems. So, you know, in the same way, so all these things to be abused, you know, for the NSA spying program to abuse everyone, they count on the fact that all this internet traffic goes through Apple servers, goes through YouTube servers, goes through Microsoft servers, where if these things were really peer-to-peer gigantic networks, much more difficult to actually abuse them. We count on the fact that, you know, to the extent that a hardware manufacturer is building all of these chips that have the secret chipset, you know, probably the factory production itself could be decentralized, you know, instead of all being produced by the same plant. You know, what if we wind up with the mechanics for, you know, for multiple people to run open source plants that produce the hardware, that produce the routers, that produce the pieces, you know, where you can't go and put enough pressure on all of them, on every single one, to make sure that it's actually building your backdoors and your things into the mechanism. I think this is one of the areas where decentralization makes the whole system robust against somebody abusing a central gateway in order to take control.
Yeah, I would think that, and also the fact that you mix. So what to do, your information, your thing don't belong to one specific place, even if it's decentralized, but you're using your cell phone to store or connect or do, then your cell phone becomes a centralized point in the system. It should be really above the platform. And the platform is distributed and decentralized, so it doesn't really matter where the computation happens, right? And I think that slowly there is the possibility to actually build an infrastructure that is safe and secure, independently of where it's running, right?
Yeah.
But we're doing our part. We're doing the
We're
basics.
building decentralized systems. It's the kind of thing exactly. And we would love to build hardware someday. So make us rich so we can build it.
Exactly. Because it's not just a matter of software. It's a mix of software
It's
and
the full
hardware.
stack,
Absolutely,
yeah.
there's a full stack and
And the software, the hardware, and the math.
it's
Like really, we need to have control of all.
and the chip on
And
the
the chip,
brain.
yeah, exactly. No, certainly, and this is how we wrap it all the way around. Like, if I'm gonna allow a chip to be put in my brain, because I think it's gonna give me some kind of superhuman thinking capacity, I'm gonna be damn well sure that the standards process is open source, and that the checking, to make sure there's no extra instructions in the chip is open source, and to make sure that there's rigorous protections put on each source, that the security is correct on the chip, that there's imagine that there's a backdoor. Say the chip is Wi-Fi, it connects to your router when you're, from your brain, right? So imagine how else does it get to the internet? I guess
It's a famous telepathic chip.
You're not going to plug an Ethernet cable into your ear.
No.
And so imagine that it has the backdoor like the Wi-Fi, and the fucking like FBI agent can go and put the instruction into your brain to carry out the thing, which they already bait people into carrying out criminal acts anyway, so they can increase their bus record or whatever. So now if they can just program you to do it, well then easier, right? So really that process has to be extremely robust, transparent. The production and checking of these things needs to be open sourced and decentralized before anybody should trust to have a chip put in their brain. And the moment Elon Musk builds it in his factory and he tells you that it's safe and you install it, you have no idea what you're getting into. And at a certain level, you're responsible for what happens to you if you're abused by it. Like, you should know better.
It's also
Now
true
that you've heard
that
us, you should know better.
it's also true that Elon Musk had open source a lot of his software, a lot of his things also related to the Tesla car, the battery mechanics.
That's good. Hopefully he
so-
does this one as well.
Exactly. Which is the real goal? Which is the real aim of Elon Musk? Because I know you, Elon, are listening to us. You watch our channel every day under Fails Identity. Tell us, chat with us, tell us what are your goals, and we're gonna invite you here in Bali to have a
Absolutely.
discussion with us. Alright, I guess we reached the end of this podcast. We have the record amount of viewers of 0.
Amazing.
And but we are getting better as we go with the technology, and I know Amazon just delivered a package for me, so probably it contains part of the things that we need to make this
The perfect setup.
exactly well. Anyways, to those that are watching, there is nobody. Monday, 3 p.m. Singapore time, 4 p.m. Tokyo time, or 3 a.m. New York time, or 8 a.m. London, 9 a.m. Rome.
Or whenever the chip in your brain tells you.
Exactly. Turn on YouTube, turn on your Facebook, turn on your whatever channel we are broadcasting to, and be sure to chat with us, comment our post, we can read and we can have a conversation.